Welcome back. It's not just the poor. UCT researchers believe that South African households across the board are facing tough financial times. The university's Liberty Institute has found that by March this year, there were more than 1.1 million people out of jobs that were paying under 3,500 Rand a month. But middle class and high income earning households are almost just as affected right now. To tell us more, we're live with Dr. James Lappeman. Dr. Lappeman, thank you so much for your time. According to your survey, consumers are being hit across the board. Who's being affected the most?
Well, look, I mean, I think as in these kind of cases, you know, when you're affected, you feel like you're the one that's affected the most. But what we wanted to do is we were hearing these big numbers, a million job losses, 1.5 million job losses, and those numbers, those numbers are big, but they're hard to comprehend. And so what we tried to do was kind of divide the consumer landscape into segments from richest to poorest, and to look at really which segments were impacted in what way. And I think, as you described correctly, in terms of kind of big numbers, it was definitely the poorest households in South Africa that have been impacted the most, and that has a lot to do with informal sector job losses. But one must also remember in South Africa that the middle class has a very important role, not only when it comes to kind of being the core of the tax base, but also the help that they provide to family members and other households beyond just their own. And so, you know, the financial pressure has been felt tremendously in the middle class as well. And I think just looking at what's been quite encouraging, looking at the NIDS CRAM data, is also our ability to track not only just kind of pre-pandemic to now, but also over the period of the last 18 months, and really to see things constantly changing. So we certainly haven't settled on a post-COVID era quite yet.
Dr. Lappeman, this term is not maybe an academic term, but it's used often, the concept of black tax. So in essence, you're saying this has been exacerbated by the pandemic.
Indeed. Again, I'm with you. It's a term that I don't like, but it's part of the lexicon at the moment. And it's been part of the South African narrative, obviously, for many decades. So this is not a new idea, but really, I think it's important for us to understand just the power or the impact that COVID has had putting pressure on middle-class families that are paying black tax, and how that is impacting their consumer behavior as well.
Tell us a little bit about the impact that less consumer spending will have on the overall economy, less consumer spending from the middle class particularly.
Yes, well, I think one thing that's important to realize about South Africa as a country is we are very much a consumption-driven country. The ability of its citizens and people in the country to spend money, to use their money to buy things, stimulates many aspects of the economy, whether it's agriculture, whether it's industry, whether it's retail, tourism. These are big sectors that are fueled by consumer spending. And so whenever there's downward pressure on consumer spending, we see that trickle-down effect into many industries. And obviously in South Africa, you know, the impact, for example, of the slowdown and almost shutdown of many aspects of tourism, for example, has just had a huge trickle-down effect, really, in income segments across the board, from wealthier segments all the way down to kind of poorer segments. And you know, to kind of give some context to that, remember that tourism has a greater contribution to GDP than mining does. So this is a big sector that's had a very big impact, and it's being felt absolutely.
Dr. Lappeman, we know the poor have been hit very hard. You're saying the middle class has been hit very hard. How are the rich doing?
So look, I mean, the rich in South Africa is certainly a smaller proportion of the population. But what you have in the wealthier segments is you've got wealth beyond just income. And so your wealthier segments tend to have income as a smaller percentage, wage income, as a smaller percentage of their income. So in the poorer segments, grant income social grant income contributes a lot, wage income contributes a lot, whereas at the top, you've got investments, you've got investment properties, you've got possible, kind of money from overseas or business interests. So if, for example, you're at the top end and you had a business or you were made very wealthy out of tourism, of course you're going to be impacted. But for many, especially in South Africa, high-skilled jobs are still in demand, and there is kind of relative wage inflation over the last 20 years. So high-skilled jobs are fairly well paid in South Africa. And so if you didn't lose your job, then aside from the humanitarian crisis, the impact certainly would be less for you in that instance.
Dr. Lappeman, thank you so much for your time. UCT researcher James Lappeman putting into perspective that it's not just the poor who've been hit hard by the pandemic, the middle class also being hit very hard, and the sort of assistance that they provide to their poorer extended family has been hit hard as well.